In 1945, Roberto Rossellini and his great cinematic masterpiece, Rome Open City, gave birth to a new film movement known as Neorealism. His film was to become the cornerstone of the movement. Roma Città Aperta turns 80 this year, and that's cause enough to celebrate. Hi, I'm Tonia Pelza, and welcome back to Bits and Bytes on Italian cinema and other stuff. The fact that Roma Città Aperta turns 80 this year is indeed something to celebrate. It attests to the fact that the film, the great Rossellini masterpiece, is enduring and that it still holds a significant place in the annals of film history. In the early 40s, while still in full war status, quite a few films were made that film historians consider antecedents, precursors of Italian neorealism. But not until Roma Città Aperta became the largest grossing film in Italy during the year it first appeared was neorealism born. So, what exactly is neorealism? Well, film, up to the outbreak of World War II, while still somewhat in its infancy, had begun to disillusion not only the public, but film directors as well. Movies up to that point, especially in Europe and primarily in Italy, had simply been commercial films that imitated American comedies and had no interest in the struggles of the working class. It was, in simple terms, escapist cinema. The industry, in fact, was no longer creating films relevant to the public. This, along with the destruction of Cinecittà film studios, led to a sudden shift in Italian cinematic storytelling, both in terms of filmmaking techniques and the subjects. These two defining factors would ultimately lead to the rise of neorealism. Things in Italy, as in the rest of Europe, were pretty bleak in 1945. The economic post-war boom would not happen for another 5 or 6 years. In the years following World War II, Italy faced immense challenges, including a devastated economy, social divisions, and a lingering sense of disillusionment with the monarchy's support for the fascist regime. The country was heavily impacted by the war, experiencing widespread destruction of infrastructure, industries, and agriculture. Throughout the war, Italy experienced a severe food crisis, and consequently, hunger and malnutrition lowered productivity. The country, from north to south, became a war-ravaged peninsula. Most Italians were consumed by a daily battle simply to survive. This was not being documented enough until Italian filmmakers began to tell stories that explored the contemporary daily life and struggles of Italians in the post-war period. What was needed, they felt, was some kind of discourse that would explain to future generations the history of Italy during a specific period through the storytelling of social life within context. As World War II ended and Mussolini's fascist government fell, the growth of neorealism in film became a sign of cultural and social change in Italy. So in the spring of 1945, once Mussolini was executed and Italy was liberated from German occupation, filmmakers set out to break from old ways and develop a more realistic approach to making films. Italian cinema went from utilizing elaborate studio sets, anyways, they had all been but destroyed by the bombings, to shooting on location in the countryside and city streets in a more realistic style. This period became known as the Italian Spring. The focus now was to depict life as it was, without embellishment or artificiality. This included using natural lighting, on location shooting, and non professional actors. For once, gone were the matinee idols. Neorealist film typically explored the conditions of the poor and the lower working class. Mostly, in these films, characters often exist within a simple social order, where survival is the primary objective. The very first neorealist film is generally thought to be Visconti's Ossessione, released in 1943 during the occupation. Director Luchino Visconti uses the story of lust and greed as a framework to present the poverty and decay of the Po River Valley in the starkest of terms. Neorealism, however, became famous globally in 1946 with Roberto Rossellini's Rome Open City, when it won the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival as the first major film produced in Italy after the war. Conceived while Italy was still occupied by the Nazis, the film was shot immediately after the country's liberation. As an award winner, Roma Città Aperta established the main characteristics of neorealist cinema. Films were almost shot exclusively on location, mostly in rundown cities as well as rural areas. Rossellini's film takes place in a war-torn Rome, and as were the many more films to come, they were shot with non-professional actors. Although, in a number of cases, well-known actors were cast in leading roles in front of a background populated by local people rather than extras brought in for the film. In Roma Città Aperta, the great and wonderful Anna Magnani was the exception that proved the rule. Despite her stardom, she had an earthy intensity and definitely lacked glamour, which made her the perfect person to represent an ordinary Italian dealing with the tough realities of life in the shadow of the Second World War. She was raw, tough, gritty, real. In 1945, my dad was 30 years old. Here he is in the streets of Rome. Why am I telling you this? Because as he walked to work one April day in 1945 on Via Raimondo Montecuccoli, he was grabbed and asked to take part in a scene that was being shot. That film would be released in the fall of 1945 and come to be known as Roma Città Aperta. And that, folks, is my claim to fame. The film tells a story of a group of Roman anti-fascists trying to survive under Nazi occupation, an occupation that was still in place in the north of Italy during the production of the film. In the ensemble piece, Magnani plays the pregnant fiancée of the regime's prime target. On the day they are due to marry, she's shot to death. Another great classic of neorealism, the 1948 De Sica masterpiece Bicycle Thieves, also uses non-professional actors to tell a story that details the hardships of working-class life after the war. Just as an aside, I should mention that just recently, in the beginning of June this year, the actor who portrayed the little boy with the hungry eyes in De Sica's film passed away at the age of 85. What a film that was. The little kid with the big eyes staring at the injustice and poverty of post-war Italy with a child's innocence. Hailed around the world as one of the greatest movies ever made, the Academy Award-winning Bicycle Thieves also takes place in poverty-stricken post-war Rome, where a man is on his first day of a new job that offers hope of salvation for his desperate family, when his bicycle, which he needs for work, is stolen. With his young son in tow, he sets off to track down the thief. Simple in construction and profoundly rich in human insight, Bicycle Thieves embodies the greatest strengths of the Italian neorealist movement: emotional clarity, social rectitude, and brutal honesty. A few of other great neorealist films of Italian cinema are Luchino Visconti's La Terra Trema, De Sica's Umberto D., Rossellini's Paisan, and Fellini's La Strada. Alas, towards the beginning of the 50s, there comes a change of direction, from bleak drama to the more carefree tones of comedy. This change will be recorded as the moment in which neorealism, heading towards twilight, will leave room for a cinema once again focused on entertainment, which will water down and put political social issues in the background. With the 1950s, that season will be definitely overcome, and neorealism becomes the visual memory of an Italy that had finally and definitively turned the page with the economic boom. 2025 marks 80 years that Italian neorealism began. This rich cinematic legacy continues to inspire filmmakers to create films that are not only visually compelling, but also deeply human. Thank you for joining me. Until the next one.